Tonight, I'm taking you back to a quiet winter evening in 1964. Outside, California's cold winds were blowing, while in the dim corridors of Stanford Research Institute, an invention that would forever change the world was coming to life. Most people were sitting at home in front of their black and white televisions, watching Bonanza, while a 39-year-old engineer named Douglas Carl Engelbart was working with a small wooden box that would shape the future. From the outside, it was nothing more than an ordinary wooden box, made of rough wood, containing simple metal parts, connected to a computer by a cable. This object sat quietly in the laboratory that night. No one knew that this simple-looking device would fundamentally change humanity's relationship with technology for the next 60 years. Tonight, I'll tell you Doug's story. This isn't just the story of an invention. It's the story of how dreams become reality, how patience and vision change the world. The story of a visionary's calm and determined journey that forever changed humanity's relationship with computers. Doug was born in 1925 near Portland, a small farming town in Oregon. Those were the final breaths of an era when America had not yet faced the Great Depression, a slower and more thoughtful age. His childhood years passed in a time when technology had not yet penetrated every moment of our lives, when people spent more time with each other. His father was an electrical engineer, and little Doug would spend hours in his father's small radio repair shop. In those days, radio was the most sophisticated technology in homes. Little Doug would watch with admiration as his father repaired those fragile circuits with his weathered hands, and began to realize for the first time how technology could make people's lives easier. These quiet moments in the small repair shop were planting the seeds of Doug's future. When Doug left home to study electrical engineering at Oregon State University, the world was changing rapidly. It was the early 1940s, and technological developments were accelerating day by day. In those years, computers were still giant machines, structures that filled entire rooms, operated with thousands of vacuum tubes, constantly heating up and very noisy. Machines like ENIAC were unreachable devices in university basements, only usable by mathematics professors. While Doug studied electrical circuits until midnight, no one could even imagine that people would one day own personal computers. Even the most ambitious science fiction writers of that era didn't think computers would enter homes. But in Doug's mind, from that young age, there was the question of how technology could make people smarter. During World War II, Doug served as a radar operator in the Navy. In the Philippines, under a dark sky, with only the green glow of the radar screen guiding him, he fell into deep thoughts about human-machine interaction. In 1945, Doug read an article that would change his life. Vannevar Bush's article, titled "As We May Think," described new ways of organizing and accessing information. Bush proposed a machine he called Memex, a system that linked information similar to how the human brain works. After reading this article, Doug had found his purpose. He wanted to create tools that would help people solve complex problems. He was dreaming something no one could imagine at the time, that computers could be not just calculating machines, but tools that enhance human intelligence. In 1957, Doug joined Stanford Research Institute. Here, he had found the perfect environment to realize his vision. But his ideas were too advanced for that era. Most of his colleagues couldn't understand the idea of computers interacting with humans. When Doug began working with a small but passionate team, the task ahead seemed enormous. In those days, computers were operated with punch cards and complex commands. To give a command to a program, you had to convert mathematical formulas into special codes, punch these codes into cards, and then wait for the machine to read these cards. A single error meant hours of work would have to start over. The question in Doug's mind was, how can people communicate with computers more naturally? At that time, this question sounded almost absurd and complex. But Doug imagined a different world. During those long winter nights in his laboratory, Doug and his team tried different interaction methods: joysticks, light pens, various control panels. Each experiment brought them a little closer to the goal, but they hadn't yet found the natural interaction they were looking for. Doug was working meticulously on a small wooden box. Inside were two metal wheels, one for the x-axis, the other for the y-axis. A cable from the box connected to the giant computer. Doug technically called this an XY position indicator, but everyone on his team started calling it a mouse because the cable coming out of it resembled a mouse's tail. This wooden box was extremely simple in appearance, even primitive. The woodwork wasn't smooth. The metal wheels sometimes squeaked. The cable was thick and clunky. But Doug was creating one of the most revolutionary interface inventions in human history in this simple object. The moment Doug first moved this small box in his hand, a cursor appeared on the screen and began following Doug's hand movements. At that moment, the human hand had touched the digital world for the first time. This simple movement would become the foundation of the relationship billions of people in the future would have with computers. In the first tests, the mouse didn't work as smoothly as Doug had imagined. The metal wheels sometimes stuck. The cursor wouldn't go where he wanted on the screen. Sometimes the mouse would suddenly slide on the screen. Sometimes it wouldn't move at all. Each of these problems led Doug and his team to find new solutions. Doug was patient. Every failure brought him one step closer to the perfect design. He tried different wheel sizes, tested various surface materials, adjusted the cable thickness. Each small change improved the mouse's performance a little more. In those days, Doug imagined that the mouse would one day be found in every home, that people would make it an indispensable part of their daily lives. Perhaps in those quiet test moments, he could see the future of that small device that billions of people would feel under their hands. Together with William English, Jeff Rulifson, Bill Paxton, and other brilliant engineers, they were laying the foundations of future computer use. Each specialized in a different area. William English worked on the mechanical part of the mouse, Jeff Rulifson on the software side, and Bill Paxton on the user interface. This small team was working on very ambitious projects by the standards of that era. Not only the mouse, but also windowed operating systems, hypertext links, video conference systems, and even the first versions of email were being developed. They were all part of an interconnected, holistic team. In the evenings, team members would stay in the laboratory, talking about the future over hot coffee. The ideas that took shape in those conversations formed the foundation of the technologies we use today. Doug's goal was becoming reality in the hands of these talented people. By 1968, Doug was ready to show his vision to the world. At the Fall Joint Computer Conference in San Francisco, he would give a 90-minute presentation. This presentation would not just be a technical presentation, but a preview of the future. Doug and his team prepared for this moment for months. The preparation process was extremely stressful. With the technology of that era, establishing a live connection to the computer at Stanford, 50 kilometers away, was nearly impossible. Video and data transmission over telephone lines, microwave connections, specially designed cameras. Everything had to work perfectly. Doug couldn't sleep at night. What if the connection failed? What if the mouse didn't work? What if the audience found it meaningless? These worries pushed him to work even harder. His team was working with the same determination, preparing for one of the most important technology presentations in history. December 9th, 1968, Monday morning. When Doug took the stage, his heart was beating rapidly. In front of him was an audience of 1,000 people, consisting of the most important names in the computer world. These people saw computers only as calculating machines. Doug was going to show them a completely different world. He moved the cursor on the screen, clicked, selected text. The audience watched first with amazement, then with growing excitement. Doug showed a windowed interface. The system we see in Windows or Mac today was demonstrated live for the first time that day. For 90 minutes, Doug showed hypertext links, multi-window systems, video conferencing, real-time collaboration. Each new feature increased the audience's amazement. Doug didn't just invent a mouse. He built a future that would expand the limits of human intelligence. The audience was literally mesmerized. The system Doug showed was technology they thought would come 20 to 30 years in the future. People raised their hands and started asking questions. How does this work? When will it go on sale? Can ordinary people use this? By the end of that day, Doug's presentation went down in history as the mother of all demos. It had become a milestone in computer history. Engineers in the audience began taking Doug's ideas and developing them in their own companies. But most importantly, Doug's vision was no longer just a dream. It had been seen by thousands of people, proven that it could be real. From that day on, the computer industry would never be the same again. Doug's invention was further developed at Xerox PARC, Palo Alto Research Center, in the 1970s. PARC was the most advanced technology research center of that era, and the world's brightest engineers worked there. Doug's mouse became an indispensable part of graphical user interfaces and windows there. The engineers at PARC took Doug's invention one step further. The mouse was no longer just a device that moved a cursor. It had become a tool that could open menus, drag files, and perform multiple tasks. In the Alto computer, the mouse formed almost all the foundations of modern computer use. These developments made Doug extremely happy. Natural interaction between humans and computers was no longer just a dream, but had become daily reality in PARC's laboratories. But the real test would be whether this technology could reach the mass market. In 1979, young Steve Jobs visited Xerox PARC and saw computers with mice. This experience deeply affected Jobs and completely changed Apple's future strategy. Jobs understood that this technology needed to be brought to the masses. The revolution Doug had started 15 years earlier was finally preparing for mass production. When Apple Lisa was released in 1983, it became one of the first personal computers sold with a mouse in history. Its price was very high, about $10,000, but it was technologically groundbreaking. Doug's small wooden box had now become an elegant plastic design. Following Lisa, the Macintosh came in 1984. The Mac, introduced with Steve Jobs' 1984 Won't Be Like 1984 commercial, brought the mouse into millions of people's lives. Doug's perfect design was now being realized not only in research laboratories, but in homes, offices, and schools. By the mid-1980s, the mouse was no longer made of wood, but plastic. The mechanical wheels had become more precise, the cables thinner and more flexible. Thousands of mice were being produced every day, shipped worldwide. Doug's simple but revolutionary concept that he designed in 1964 was becoming an indispensable part of daily life. Every detail was important in the production process. Plastic molds, wheel mechanisms, cable connections. While only functionality was important in Doug's first wooden prototype, now factors like ergonomics, durability, cost, and aesthetics were also in play. During this period, Doug would visit factories and watch the mass production of his own invention. Millions of people could now do their daily work thanks to Doug's invention. Today, billions of people around the world use a mouse every day. Most of us don't even think about how it works. We turn on our computer, move the mouse, click. Everything is so natural that we forget this was technology that seemed impossible 60 years ago. Doug's dream came true completely. Computers became tools that enhance human intelligence and are naturally usable. The mouse became one of the most important components of this transformation. From graphic design to games, from programming to browsing the internet, working without a mouse in any field is now almost impossible. Modern mice now use optical sensors, work wirelessly, and can even be controlled with voice commands. But the basic principle is the same. the human-computer interaction that Doug designed in that cold laboratory in 1964. When Doug Engelbart passed away in 2013 at the age of 88, he left behind an enormous legacy. He had created much more than the mouse. He had become a visionary who fundamentally changed the relationship between humans and technology. Hypertext, video conferencing, email, multi-window systems. Most of the technologies we use today are based on Doug's vision from the 1960s. In his final years, Doug advocated that technology should focus on solving humanity's big problems: global warming, poverty, education. Technology's role in solving these problems needed to increase. He was a perfect man who thought not only about the tools, but also about how these tools should be used. Doug's story teaches us this: the greatest inventions usually emerge in quiet moments, with patient work and farsightedness. That small wooden box wasn't just a tool. It was a bridge that forever changed the relationship between humanity and technology. Doug's vision continues to live in the daily lives of billions of people today. Tonight, as you sleep, think of Doug's quiet 1964 laboratory. On a snowy winter night, under dim light, hands that shaped the future were working. The small wooden box created by those hands changed the world. And now, that future lives under your hands, with every movement of your mouse. Perhaps Doug's greatest achievement was making his invention invisible. The mouse became so natural that we forget what a revolution it was. This is perhaps the greatest praise: technology becoming so harmonious with humans that we don't even feel its presence. Now close your eyes and think of that quiet laboratory. Perhaps while you sleep, Doug's vision continues to shape the future at your fingertips. As that first mouse in Doug's hands transforms into the mouse under your hand, past and future unite in that small movement.